Hello and welcome to another Leaguecast patron show. It's me, Aidan, your host, and I'm sick still, but I will not cough. I promise. That's good. As soon as I cough, we end the episode. That's how it works. But joining me is Nick.
Hey, what's going on?
And no Colton. We're recording this on our lunch break. So lucky you guys. But anyways, what we're going to do today is we're just going to talk about a bunch of shit that people argue about in the Discord. We're going to make the final say on everything. So anything from voice chat, coaching, role strength, NA versus EU, preseason items, all that. We're going to tell you how to think.
Mm-hmm. This is your echo chamber. So parrot these ideas. Yeah, let's jump into it.
Cool. Let's start with voice chat, which I think is something that it's argued about less frequently, but it comes up like on repeat.
Yeah, a decent amount.
Couple months. So I think you and I disagree on this. I think I was originally closer to your perspective, and I slowly moved away from it. Partially because I think it's fucking annoying when people talk about it. So it almost like pushes me away.
Yeah, I understand that perspective.
But do you want to give your perspective on it first?
Yeah, so I'm of the opinion that it could only lead to like higher quality games. I'll preface this by saying like I'm a straight white male, so there's not a lot of immutable characteristics that I could be, verbally abused for. So I think that's the only argument against it is like, yeah, it's gonna be toxic as fuck. But like from my own, anecdotal experience, like the most fun I ever have in League, whether that be like winning or even just like enjoying the game, always comes down to like being in comms with someone, or someone's, to play through it. And I think, my big argument, versus the toxicity, which is, I think the only arguable point is that it's really hard to say really mean and toxic things to someone when you hear like a voice versus, being just a name on a screen.
Oh, for sure. I completely agree with that. My perspective, on the other hand, it's changed a lot. I think I was closer to that, mainly because like when you play and you have plays that feel like they could have been better if you had voice chat, it feels very demotivating, I think. That being said, also, let's just get this out of the way. Voice chat's not going to be added. So
yeah, 100%. So all of this is kind of moot anyway.
Yeah, I also don't think that's like a good argument either.
Yeah,
like, I've seen arguments boil down to someone goes, "Well, it's not added anyways." So, and it's like that's kind of lame as well because I think there is a good discussion to be had at the very least about it. That being said, the reason why it's not going to be implemented in the game is that Valorant has voice chat, which I think most people think is all right, other than the fact that it's extremely toxic. And whenever you hear about Valorant in esports news, it's usually about a woman streamer being just harassed, which isn't great. And I think Riot dealing with obviously $100 million like women's rights lawsuit probably doesn't want that with their prime product, I would argue. Who knows? Maybe they'll eventually add it. I just think that's probably the landscape of why it won't be added. But with regards to my opinion is... So I have a bunch of like points, and I think they're all disjointed, but I think they all kind of contribute to the fact that I don't think it's really necessary. Kind of starts with the fact that I think a lot, and don't get me wrong, I think I have an issue with I'm attacking a lot of people's like way that they're like a lot of their arguments rather than attacking voice chat itself, which I do think is a flawed way of approaching stuff, by the way. Just to give this, I am aware. Like, for example, a lot of people want voice chat because they think it will improve the quality of ranked. I think a lot of these people will be very disappointed when voice chat is added when, not everyone joins voice chat, which makes for a worse ranked experience, in my opinion. I think if you have 3 out of 5 people in voice chat, I think that's worse than having 0 out of 5 people in voice chat. I think that it just leads to less people are pinging, less people are typing to communicate with the other people, and therefore you have like actually a lesser communication, right? We talk a lot about like having 5 people on the same page is way more important for the wrong reason than having 4 people or 3 people or 2 people on the same page. And I think that is like definitely something that will occur with voice chat. I think you have very few games where all 5 people are in voice chat. And I also think that leads to the whole Overwatch thing. I played a lot of Overwatch, by the way. if you're not in voice chat, you fucking get flamed for not being in voice chat, which is also a weird thing. You're almost like the scapegoat for your team for anything that goes wrong. I think issues like that are always like super weird about voice chat, especially when it's opt-in, which I think it has to be opt-in. It can't be mandatory.
Yeah, it has to be opt-in.
I also don't think it should be opt-out either. I think that's another weird way of doing it. And then so I think a lot of these people who have voice chat are going to be disappointed with how it's implemented, disappointed how people use it, and then even more disappointed when they lose rank because they're not good communicators. I think that's another thing that like no one considers, is the fact that a lot of people that I see championing voice chat in our Discord, at least, are typically people who, when I play community games, or that's a more fun environment, I don't think it's a one-to-one translation, are not good communicators, right?
Yeah, communicating far too much information, stuff that isn't necessarily relevant, and winds up being like pretty distracting, right?
Yeah, for sure. Like you saying that like this guy burned a health potion is fucking useless information that just clogs comms. You know what I mean? But anyways, once again, this is more like attacking people's arguments. My actual core of it though comes from the fact that I don't think anyone's really going to use it, is like the reality. I think not everyone's going to be on board. If people were already like wanting it that bad, I think we would already say a higher use of people just linking Discords. I think people used to link Discords way more years ago than people do now. Like, which is crazy because I feel like there's a larger discourse of why voice chat's needed, when it feels like you have a pretty easy to use option to implement voice chat into your games. And it would be an opt-in thing. It is an external program. Don't get me wrong. It's not a one-to-one, like clicking a button in League to get voice chat versus clicking a link to join someone's Discord is a completely different thing. That being said, I think if people thought so strongly about voice chat, I feel like more people would be linking these things, right? I feel like you would take that extra step if you felt so strongly about it. And maybe it's just because everyone who wants voice chat doesn't actually care that much. But then it feels like if people don't care that much, why are we championing it so strongly?
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess my counterpoint to that is that every other popular online game has voice chat. And there is toxicity that exists in those games for sure. However, I think it's just like a normalized part of, not the toxicity, but like voice chat has just become a normalized part of those games that like, even if you aren't like joining voice chat in Dota, like you can still, you know, it is, I think it's opt out, but there's like push to talk, I believe. So it winds up with people who like are in voice chat and can hear you, but you know, don't end up saying anything because they don't want to. And I think like that could be a way to go about it. But yeah, I mean, there's like, there's a lot to be said for, you know, I've seen, I think one person post Discord link in, you know, the like 200 ranked games, 300 ranked games that I have. And then there's a lot to be said for, it is a third party program and harder to get people to join, and let alone like click on the link, like just period. But, yeah, I don't know. I think, I
think one thing that you nailed is that like I think the social aspect of games is slowly fading away, right? I think that's a very, very sad thing. I think games are a good social thing, especially when it's normalized to not be a fucking cunt bag all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess like a lot of games that have voice chat, I kind of either A, don't use it, or B, think that it leads a lot of the time to a worse product. So I'm like on two camps where like I think social things in games is awesome. I just think that the way that people currently interact with people in games is a super not positive thing that leads to a lot of people having negative interactions online, right? Like I think Overwatch is an awesome game. I think that voice chat, I've never seen someone not join voice chat and not get flamed for it. Like it's so weird.
Yeah.
But either way, not going to happen regardless.
Yeah,
but
that's kind of the go-to for like, okay, we've been discussing this for way too long. Like,
yeah.
It's just not going to happen anyway. Like in the Discord. But yeah, hopefully, I mean, you know, maybe it's not out of the scope of things years from now, but for like definitely off the table at the moment.
Yeah. Cool. You want to talk about coaching a little bit?
Yeah, I do. So this is something that I also think we disagree a little bit on. Just a tiny bit, actually. We've had a lot of discussion about like coaching and a particular coach in general. I don't know if we should like
I think so.
names,
Like it's
but
definitely like
sure,
obviously
yeah.
related about Nice.
Okay.
I think this is the discussion that I'd say it's been happening the most frequently recently. Maybe
Yeah.
in like the next closest would be NA versus EU, but that's a smaller issue. But I do think this is the discussion that gets the most heated out of all of them.
Yeah, definitely. There are definitely people who are, I guess, like big stans, and people who are big like haters, anti-stans, whatever the term is for it. But definitely people who stake out very, very strong opinions on either side. So I guess my opinion is that like, I think the big issue comes from the amount that he's charging for coaching. For the people who disagree with how he handles his coaching. And I personally think it's okay. Like, it is okay as long as he is not misleading people as to like the product he's offering and his credentials, like things like that. If he's, if he is the challenger player he is claiming to be and has like proof, at least to some degree of, and he is offering that, I think that is okay. Let me rephrase. I don't think there is anything inherently wrong with someone charging whatever amount that they feel is fair and that the market feels is fair, the customers will pay for, as long as there is no misleading, like misleading of the consumer. If we have like Faker, for instance, charging for coaching, I would be 100% okay if that were like, hey, I'm going to charge $5,000 an hour. Like this is going to have to be something very expensive because there's a lot of demand for my coaching and I have the credentials to back it up. Now, I think that's like where a lot of people differ. They're like, okay, there's just adequate coaching for less than that. So it must be like that he's scamming people or necessarily taking advantage of people who don't know any better. But I don't necessarily think that's his fault if people are willing to pay for it.
No, I see that. I do think that like customer protection is something that isn't really found on the online space, which worries me a little bit. I think the main thing is well, the whole, if you want to go all the way back, is at its core, coaching is a quicker way for you to learn if you want to put in the time, right? And people say, well, I get coaching. Like I tried to do my own online learning and didn't really improve. Well, the reality is you're obviously just not putting in the time. There is a billion online resources to learn. It's just, guess what, dude? No one wants to actually put in the time to learn shit, right? And that's the exact same with coaching, except that it's at a monetary price. Like you have to pay for it. So like this is a huge discussion in the Melee scene where people charge the same like high rates for coaching by like pro players and stuff like that, and then they get just people who are obviously fans of these people who buy the coaching. Sit with them for an hour or whatever, and then they buy it again next week and they come back and they haven't practiced at all, right? It's the same thing as a fucking like parent buying a kid piano lessons or like whatever lessons, and then the kid goes to the lessons and plays and then he doesn't practice at all, right? You get zero out of that except the fact that you're spending a shitload of money. And that's what worries me, is I think that a lot of people who buy coaching from someone like Nice or any big figure who charges a lot are typically players who are of lower ELO who maybe don't understand that they still have to put the time in and therefore are completely getting zero value or little to zero value out of his coaching. And I think there needs to be some level of consumer protection. So I'm a big fan of Ellis. I think that's pretty straightforward. Ellis used to do coaching and he used to charge a fucked amount of money, right? And that was, I kind of respect him, of like, like it's weird that it's that much, but I also understand like at like time, if he charged anything less, then he'd be full up all the time. I feel like that's another Nice argument, right? And then one thing Ellis did was he changed it to, it was more money the lower ELO you are.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So the idea was that like it was to disincentivize like lower ELO players. I still think there's issues with that. I still think that like charging a Iron player $500 an hour or whatever is taking advantage of people who don't know the worth, right? Or people who are not going to get stuff out of it. I completely understand the argument. I feel like this is the biggest voice in our Discord is if someone wants to fucking pay it, let them pay it, right? And I think that to a degree. I do think that at some point you're taking advantage of people, right? Especially if like there's the weird like whole dynamic of, I haven't watched too many East coaching discussions, just a couple that were like more like laughing at stuff that he gets wrong in coaching. So I am biased against Nice right now. Don't get me wrong. I haven't seen his side too much, other than the fact that I've tuned into his stream and I've never seen him play on an account over Platt, which is also weird. But I do understand that perspective, but I also think that, like, for example, if you're coaching someone, you're like, holy fuck, man, you're improving so much. Holy shit, good job. Like, I think weird shit like that incentivizes people to buy your coaching again. If those people are easily susceptible to paying fucking $350 an hour for coaching, at some point you're taking advantage of people, right? And it's weird, and yeah, sure, you can say that you can spend money however you want, the fuck you want, but it's still weird. I don't think there's any other coaches that charge that much anymore. I think that's a good thing. The reality is, if you want coaching, go to someone who's cheap. If you go to r/lol coaching, I think is the subreddit. I should check that before I actually say it. There's like tons of people who are trying to get their start in coaching. They're probably worse coaches than Nice, but they're also charging like $5 an hour. Some people are charging free because they just want like they're starting up on like a coaching website and they just want like reviews, right? So they're just doing free coaching sessions. Like, you can get tons of like diamond plus coaches for like 1/50th of the price of someone like Nice. And I feel like at some point there's a value proposition that he's just taking advantage of people because he is the biggest. And I understand his perspective of he can't charge less because it's too much, right? But you also still have to some level, provide something that's as of value, right? And that's where I think it's weird. I think he definitely does not even come close to providing $350 worth of value per hour to people. I think people who are the most into his content are typically lower elo players who definitely don't need that, and are probably more susceptible in the fact that they're fans of him, which is also this weird dynamic. And I don't know. I just think it's like super shitty. I also think like his whole fucking villain arc on Twitter, like I think it's mostly to generate publicity. Like, this is, by the way, all this like shit about him has just been good for him. Like, there's no way it's not.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But like, the weird fucking villain persona that he puts on also just fucking leaves a really bad taste in my mouth. Like,
yeah, I'm
like,
definitely not a fan of that.
Like, oh, we don't think you've ever hit Challenger in 5 rolls, and then he just fucking like goes on like all caps tirades and like, I don't know, it's just fucking weird, man. It makes me very much like want to find reasons to disagree with him, which I think is also a really shitty way of doing it. But like, holy fuck, it's just so weird. But either way, I just don't like the core of it. I don't want him to take advantage of people. And I feel like the people that are his core audience are people who are easily taken advantage of for the value of the coaching. Like, if he's coaching, okay, I don't know a single fucking Challenger player has gone to Nice for coaching. But like, for example, Ellis was coaching Challenger players, right? He's coached like Whippo, Crown Shot, like all these pro players, right? He obviously probably doesn't charge them, but like, it feels like those people could actually get value out of something that Ellis provides for a price that they can pay. And I just don't think there's too many gold or silver players that can get value of what he's teaching for the price that he's paying or they're paying.
Okay. Yeah, that's probably fair. How would you suggest that he fixes this? Like, do you think he should make a disclaimer?
I think he already has a good system. Like, I think that like his personal coaching is fucking whack, but he also has a coaching like boot camp that he does every year or like a couple times a year where he charges like, I don't know how much. Let's just say it's $50. It might be less. It might be more. And it's like a bunch of weeks of courses and other shit. And then you're in a community of people who are also learning. I think that's fucking brilliant. What a good way to expand your coaching business. He's obviously a good teacher. I think that's a fair thing to say, to a large variety of people, without like being like, I can't work with someone for 1 hour and charge them $20, but I can work with 1,000 people, all charging them $20 for a couple months, right?
So do you think he should only do the boot camps, or do you think he should like be able? I
think that should be a bigger part of his business.
Okay.
I think the personal coaching, I think it could. I also think I was gonna say like you could do it like by like the ELO tier. I think that's also whack because I still think there's gonna be Iron players who want to pay the $500 to fucking hang out with them. I mean, the reality is that it's probably fine him doing private coaching or on stream coaching for $250, $300. I think. One thing that LS did, which LS doesn't coach at all anymore, was he had himself, who was the number one coach, but he also had like, I don't know, 10 or so other people who he like verified. He thinks these people are really, really good coaches. And he constantly recommended them, right? Like, I know on Nice's site, he has like a bunch of other coaches like listed, like Phalaris is the jungle guy. He's like on there for like $150 an hour. I think it would be good if he had like a bunch of $50 coaches that maybe he has trained himself to coach, right? That are like grandmaster players. I feel like, and if a gold player comes to him, he can be like, hey, I would really recommend that maybe $350 isn't like what you need right now. I would like to see you maybe like work with this coach for like a couple weeks, $50 an hour. It's still expensive. But maybe after that, if you see improvement, maybe we can talk about me coaching you after. It feels like just accepting people like gold players asking $350 an hour for coaching is fucking whack.
Yeah, I guess I can understand that. It is still hard for me to sort of justify telling Nice that he is not able to charge what people are willing to pay for his product. You know, like I do still think to some degree, like, yeah, it should just be up to him and his customers. But I can understand that there is probably some aspect of like taking advantage of customers who aren't knowledgeable. But I mean, is the opposite true? Should you have to be an expert to like pay for a product? You know, like is there some line that we can draw between between the two? I guess that's another question.
Yeah, it just feels like more transparency in general, I think, is good. That's something we can both agree on. Like all of his coaches should probably have their ranks like listed, right? Like they're all, when you go to their description, it's just like high elo coach, or Nice's is like multi-role challenger.
Yeah,
a little bit more transparency about that I think would be great. Maybe areas of expertise would be good. I know Nice does everyone, and some of his other coaches are like, for example, Flaris is only a jungle coach. He has another coach that's only a support coach. I think stuff like that's really, really positive. And then I really do think having a couple lower tier options would be a very positive thing to dissuade certain players from paying $350 an hour, right? Like if he had a couple of $50 coaches that he recommended that he could like verified are good coaches, I think that's fucking awesome. And I think his bootcamp is one of the best ideas. I haven't obviously participated in the bootcamp. I've heard good things about his bootcamp thing that he does. But that seems like the best way to coach a ton of people for a more acceptable rate. Like that should be applicable to that ELO range.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
But like nothing, I don't think he's doing anything wrong. Like I don't think he's like the fucking devil like some people do. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Like I definitely don't think he is like malicious, at least. I don't think he is like intentionally taking advantage of people. But you're right. The practice itself probably could be predatory, and could, I'm sure, like everything, could use more protection against like capitalistic tendencies.
Yeah. No, I mean, like the reality is like people. I had a listener like a couple weeks back ask how much they could pay me to play with them and flex a bunch, and I'm just like, I'm not fucking doing that. I'll just play with you. Like, and it's like I'm sure that's to a larger scale what someone like Nice has, right? And I'm not saying he takes advantage of those people. I'm just saying that he's in a position where he has a lot of people who are willing to pay money that they probably shouldn't be paying for the value that they're getting. And that's like, I think there's customer protections that are in a lot of industries that would maybe stop stuff like that.
Okay, fair enough.
But either way, I think his like fucking bootcamp thing is brilliant. I think he needs to do that probably more. I'm sure it's a shitload of work, but I think it's like the best introduction way to coaching, because it's also like the biggest thing about coaching that both you agree on is you have to put in the work too. You don't just get a coach for an hour and you're fucking better. Like I take the stuff and practice it.
I almost would recommend that people don't get coaching, and instead that they like look up some of the like buzzwords that they hear. Like just watch like a free coaching session, and then go from there. Because I truly think that the best resource is just the free stuff that you have on YouTube. Like there are so many resources dedicated to like wave management or specific matchups. You know, in our last discussion, I searched up, I think, Garen versus Riven top lane patch, whatever patch we're on, challenger, and there's a challenger game where like you can you can then see how the matchup works and go from there. But that requires a lot more work instead of like a coaching session where you're right, someone will just say like, hey, good job, you know, come back and keep going. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that's like the best way to like learn and teach. Like once again, neither of us have ever gotten coaching. We just like learn from stuff. Like I was talking to Drew a couple weeks ago. Like Like whenever I have a hard Tom Kench matchup, I fucking just look up a better player playing.
Yeah. And I think the counterpoint to that would be like, well, if you don't even know like where to start, then it becomes more difficult. Like if you were just starting the game and needed to know like how to manage wave and top lanes, like maybe you don't even know what it's called enough to find that resource, right? Like it's easy for us to say, yeah, just go to YouTube and look up wave management top lane. But if you're not familiar with those like base level terms, you know, I don't think like obviously we don't think coaching is a bad thing, but I think that would be probably the most pragmatic.
I mean, it could be a great thing, right? Like obviously high elo players get coaching from like professional coaches, but those people are also putting in a shitload of hours to transfer that coaching into actual like, gains, right? Like I mean, fucking literally pro players get coaching from like people like Vigar V2. LS, you know what I mean? Like, because these people actually practice all the time, and therefore the stuff they're getting from their hour of coaching is actually tangible and then can be turned into progress. But I just don't think the majority of the player base who gets coaching fucking does that.
No, absolutely not. I mean, it's really hard to go play 20 games trying to implement the strategy that you know you were told to implement than it is to just do it once and then come back again for coaching, I guess.
I mean, like a good comparison is like we do $5 OP.GG reviews, right? I would say most people like to look at the stuff and like whatever, cool. But by the way, we're completely open if people want to ever ask us questions about the stuff we write there. You're more than free to message us. The only person that I see on a month-to-month basis improve is fucking Wolfie on our Discord.
Really?
He's an AD carry player, and every single month I'll like talk to him about just making 5 comments like, hey, this is what you're currently playing in the meta. He plays AD carry. I think this AD carry is up and coming. I think it fits your play style. And next month he'll fucking transition to playing it, or he'll try it and it won't work out, and he'll like go back to playing it. It's like every single month though, I see like tangible like he read what I wrote and he's trying new shit, which is fucking crazy. Like it's really cool to see.
Yeah, I would say that like I don't have that experience at all. I feel like I'm reviewing the same stuff every single month, and like it sucks because I don't want you to pay us $5 and then for me to tell you, hey, like you should be changing your runes up every game, and that's it. You know, that feels shitty to write, I'm sure, as much as it does to read. But if I see you take armor runes into a Teemo top because that's what your preset top lane page is, like that's a big part of me, like the feedback that I think is important to you, because you're not doing the small things that will allow you to properly incorporate the big things.
For sure.
So I guess I'm in the same boat.
Do you want to talk about role strike a little bit? I feel like we've slowly become closer together on this one.
Yeah, so I think this is something that we discussed a little bit on the show actually this week. So sorry if there's any overlap. But yeah, I'm of the opinion that roles are pretty equal. There's always going to be a strongest and a weakest role, and I do think like right now it is like bot lane in like as a tandem that is the strongest. But I think like there are a lot of my perspective on this is that there are a lot of arguments that seem to only apply to like bot laners that don't necessarily apply to solo laners. Right. If we see that like Sona Seraphine is the best way to play bot lane, and people refuse to play it, I feel like that is unacceptable in bot lane, but acceptable and sort of the norm for solo lanes. Right. And I understand there's some like, hey, it's a video game, like it should be fun. I'm gonna play whatever's fun for me. But I think then that should apply to like bot laners and supports and things like that.
Yeah, no, for sure. I get that. Like my whole perspective is that I do think top lane is weaker than the other roles. I also think that it's normal for a team game to have positions that are weaker than other positions, right? Like it's a very normal thing in sports to have like a midfield in soccer or something like that, right? Like be a less impactful role than like a striker or like a goalie, right? I think that's a very normal thing for like team things. The difference is in League of Legends, your team changes every game, so therefore the variables on your team that have quote unquote more control change, right? So
have more variance as well, yeah.
More variance, yeah. And then also the power of the actual roles shifts based on how the fuck Riot wants to balance the game, right? So like your striker might be a weak role next year.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Mm-hmm. So your goalie got fucking giga nerfed.
Yeah, the goal is just 3 times bigger this patch. So
that'd be insane.
No, so it is really weird where it's like, obviously, like there are going to be different strikes. I think they are relatively similar. Mostly, by the way, I think it's because in League of Legends, comps are pretty fucking standardized. You always have a top laner who's typically a bruiser, a tank, sometimes a carry, but I'd say that's very rare. Mid lane. Sorry, I coughed a little bit. Mid lane.
Sorry, guys, that'll do it for this episode.
Mid lane, you have like a mage or like an assassin, sometimes like a tank, but that's super infrequent. Bottom lane, I would say 98% of the time have an 80
carries.
Mm-hmm. Like, occasionally it's a mage, which I still think is super undervalued. And then support, you have typically an enchanter tank, right? And I think the fact that you always have these pretty standardized things in both teams makes the game feel equal, right? If enchanters are super OP, tops a super weak lane, in theory you can roam around and fuck up the map, then it's super imbalanced if one of the two top laners goes an enchanter and plays a roamer, right?
Yeah.
But if both players are playing tanks bruisers, then you have a fucking equal match, and it really doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah, it's like even if your role is weak, you have as much determination on the outcome of the match as your counterpart who also is sharing in that weakness or strength or whatever.
Yeah, like the one huge thing that I always hear, like from like I also, don't get me wrong, I'm a fucking anti AD carry player. AD carries like will say like my role's not weak. No AD carries ever had like over like a 52% win rate or something like that, right? It's like, well, because you're always laning versus an AD carry, right? Like it balances it out because the rules are so matched, which I think is fine for like a team game. The reality is League of Legends is a game that, for the most part, is a very individual game, but then shapes into a team game, right? Like and it does it in a weird way where it's definitely not a single player game like a fighting game, and it's definitely not a team game like honestly fucking any other team game out there. Like honestly, I think League of Legends might be the least team game out of any team game.
That's a really good way to describe it. Yeah, like there's a team aspect of it, but for probably a good 75% of the game, you're playing a single player game, right? With maybe you'll have like some interaction with another player, like another ally or enemy team, I guess, at some points. But a lot of that is solo play.
Yeah, and people like a lot of the time will say like, oh, like I can't affect the game. Dude, if you run into a team fight and die at the beginning, you're losing that team fight.
Yeah, like you've affected the game. Even if you affect it negatively, it's still affecting it.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like the reality is like, I'm trying my best to perpetuate stuff less. Like I try to do it in a more memey way, but I still think there is a little bit of a negative like thing that it creates. Like I do think top lane is the weakest lane. I play that lane. It's probably biased a little bit. I don't think it's as fucking bad as some people make it out to be. But the problem I have is that I think it's perpetuating a larger narrative where like if you're a top laner, you just have no fucking chance, man. Like it really is
exactly.
just a coin flip. Like and I'm doing it more as a joke. Like obviously like when I said on the show last night, I'm 2-0 in my series to master. I have a 12% chance of I only have a 12% chance of losing my games, implying that it's a 50-50 every game. Obviously it's fucking not. I have a 65% win rate in solo queue for a reason. Like
Yeah, exactly. Like if the role was so terrible, I literally think we'd just go back to like roaming top laners, like, and we would make it work with low econ, and I wouldn't have the Jax running over running over the entire game because he hit 2 items. I think
and that could be the best way to play it, by the way. Like that honestly,
exactly.
I think playing low econ top and playing with your team is way more efficient. I don't know if it's to the degree of we should start running Gianna again, but it could be. Like,
it could be. And guess what? It is okay to say like I don't want to play that. I just think then that same courtesy should be extended to like, hey, I want to play Caitlyn or I want to play crit 80 carries, but crit is really really weak, so I have to play like on hit or I have to play mages, like, and I don't think that sympathy is equal for all roles, I guess, and maybe it's because like historically 80 carries have been like or marksman as a role like has really not been weak and has really had high highs. Like we are literally just coming out of probably the best, like the highest peaks 80 carry has ever had, in which like if you didn't have some combination of Sivir or Zeri plus Yumi Lulu, like I almost think you were like guaranteed to lose the game. And like when a role has that much like strength, it is hard to feel like bad for it. Absolutely. I definitely understand that. So I guess like that's where I'm at.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty much in agreement. I think like it's a game that will constantly shift by balance changes. I wouldn't be surprised if that when preseason starts, something like Goliath, which we'll get into in a second, maybe it is the most turbo broken item in the game, and top lane is just fucking turbo OP. That's a possibility, and that's just how the game works, right? It doesn't mean that like other roles you should be like, oh well, fuck you guys. Now you have the weak role. No, like the game just changes. You have to accept what's given. You play around it. If you're a one trick, like for example, I'm a one trick. I think Tom Kench is currently slightly weak. He's not terrible, but let's just say I'm like a fucking Zeri man. I'm a Zeri one trick, right? Yeah, it's fucking unplayable right now, and that sucks. And like I do feel for people who want to play the thing they want to play. Like I said on the show last night, where I think AD Assassin should be strong. I think if you're someone who likes playing AD Assassin, I understand why you play this video game, right? Like it's a very specific role, and that being weak makes you probably enjoy the game less. It doesn't mean that the game has to always conform to what you're doing, but I do understand people being upset when their role isn't as strong.
Yeah, definitely. I get that as well. Yeah, for sure. And I would agree with you that top lane is currently that role.
We talked about the systematic things last night about like there's counter picks and stuff like that, which I don't think a lot of that changes. I honestly like the reality is it's fine. I just think you need to play more team oriented right now, which isn't a bad thing, because I think the counterpoint of, let's just say top lane is in a good spot, but you also don't have to play team play. That means that these characters are probably just going to run over your team more consistently late game, right?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
If top lane is a strong lane and you don't have to play team fights, and it's still considered strong, then you have characters like Jax that are probably going to like 1v9 later.
Yeah, which like is probably bad for the game, like as a whole. You know, it's probably not a good thing.
Like,
yeah, to the same degree as like Zeri shouldn't be 1v9ing because she has a cat, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, it's a game that will constantly balance. It just has a lot of moving parts, and I think it's fine to be down on stuff, but the reality is like there's always going to be people making shit work in every ELO of the game, so it's obviously not that bad.
Yeah,
like, I'm sure there's still Zeri players who are like Master Plus. Like,
yeah, definitely, for sure.
Cool. Let's quickly talk about NA versus EU. I feel like this is a short one for the most part.
Yeah, I'm gonna go on record and say like I'm a fucking Western hater when it comes to.
He's the biggest hater.
It's just like I know that I'm not gonna get like, maybe it'll be entertaining, but I know I'm not gonna get the highest quality League of Legends. Like so I'm not gonna like root for them unless it's CLG, because that's a little like homerism, I guess. But like a lot of people are saying like cheer for Rogue, they're the last Western team. No, I'm gonna cheer for the best League of Legends, and that like I know that's not coming from Rogue. Maybe that's a little insensitive and like, you know, kind of feels bad, man. But I don't know. It's cringe. It's cringe to support a region as a whole. I'll say it.
Yeah, no, I think that's fine. I think there's like something that's like kind of fun when your teams do well. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's cool regardless, seeing like when Fnatic or G2 were in finals. That's fucking cool. But they were also just playing well, good League of Legends.
Yeah, exactly.
I wouldn't want fucking Cloud9 this year to be in finals playing like they were playing, right?
Yeah, like, exactly. I wouldn't want the tournament to be like, we're going to have the best Western team versus the best Eastern team, and that's how we're going to determine who is the best League of Legends.
There's a Western bracket and an Eastern bracket.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think that would just ruin League of Legends as a whole. But I think there's a lot of people who'd be really excited for that, because like, okay, now it just comes down to one best of 5, right? Like we can do this now. We just have to cheese out 3 wins. Are you kidding me? Like that's it. Whereas like I think that would ruin the game. I'm totally okay with seeing 4 Eastern teams in the semifinals. I'm okay with having 8 Eastern teams in the quarterfinals. Like, you know, as long as the best teams get out of groups, that's the only thing like I care about. And that
I still want to have a discussion on the show in a couple weeks about like Worlds format, but like one thing that like is a huge discussion point is like, what is Worlds trying to accomplish, right? Like in theory, if we want the best League of Legends, we should probably have like 6 Korean teams, 6 Chinese teams, right? That's probably the reality. I don't think that Worlds is supposed to showcase that. Personally, I think in my perfect world, we have 2 teams from each region: NA, EU, China, Korea, And then you have international events being Rift Rivals and MSI that give other seeds. Like MSI gives a seed to the winning region. You have Rift Rival, which is NA versus EU, and then China versus Korea, and that gives both those regions an extra seed. How fucking cool would that be, though? Like,
yeah, that'd be cool. I like that.
Like, so it's 2-2-2-2, which obviously isn't fair because NA and EU are not even fucking close to China, Korea. That being said, you have MSI where probably a Chinese or Korean team's going to win. So they get an extra seed. So it's like 3-2-2-2-2. And then you have Rift Rivals, which is going to give either NA or EU an extra seed. So it's going to be 3-2 for NA EU. And then it's going to be either 4-2 or 3-2 for Korea, China for like seeds. I feel like having international events determine seeds for like teams, because that's the international strike. It's such a fucking cool way to have a hype tournament.
Yeah, I think so too. I like that a lot, actually. I think that would be a good way to sort of bridge that gap between, like, we definitely shouldn't be having 4 EU teams at this tournament and be at the same par as like a team that, or a region that actually wins the international tournament every single year, right? Yeah. And I think, like, so onto, I guess, the bigger like discussion. I think it's really cringe to like to try to eke out like one region over the other when historically like it has very clearly been like LCK plus LPL, like alternating between 1 and 2, like however you want to divide it up that year. And then like the other teams are just battling for scraps, right? It's just like whoever's able to eke out a couple wins like is just so much better. Especially when like in the grand scheme of things, like there's been some EU teams that have made a semifinal based on like very advantageous brackets, right? Like, are we really going to sit here and say like HGK was the 4th best team in the world in, what was it, 2016? Definitely not. Definitely not. So I think to say like, oh, fucking NA's way better than EU or EU's way better than NA is just like, it's a little weird.
It's a little whack.
Yeah. It's a little weird for me.
Yeah, the reality of it is like the China and Korea's gap is so fucking far over NA and EU. I think it's pretty fucking clear cut. Like, I think the top 2 is harder to decide who's better between the two regions than it is for NAEU. It's pretty fucking clear that EU is 3rd and it's not close to 2nd, and it's pretty fucking clear that NA is 4th and is worse than EU. Like,
yeah,
like,
for sure.
And like head to head, NA in theory has a better world's record than EU at this Worlds and last Worlds. That being said, our record versus fucking Eastern teams is fucking so bad. But the people like on the contrary, you have people that are fucking weird and they're like, I don't even know if NA is the 4th best team.
Yeah, that's fucking insane to me. You're trolling out of your mind.
Like, it's so fucking clear cut, man. That like I don't know. Like I think NA drops games to like a 5th, 6th seed team. Like, I think that's normal, but they also pretty clearly always get out of play-ins, and they pretty clearly beat the teams that they're always supposed to beat and then lose to the teams they're always supposed to lose to. They never upset, which is fucking embarrassing. They should, in best of ones, you should be able to take a game off Korea or China. All right, that's pretty fucking straightforward. They never fucking do that as much as they should. That being said, especially with world, like, oh, here's another thing. Just like, let me back up it here. People like are like NA and EU, their records at Worlds are getting worse and worse. We're having more fucking Chinese and Korean teams in Worlds. What do you mean? Like, I'm so confused. Like, we pretty clearly understand China and Korea are the best 2 regions by like a lot. And if you include more Chinese and Korean teams in groups, NA and EU, you're gonna win less. Like, I don't know like what the whole logic is. You know, shit. Like, fucking Cloud9 3 years ago did better at Worlds when they had fucking VCS or a wild card team in their group. Like. And don't get me wrong, I do think there's the counter argument of, yeah, well, 100 Thieves lost to Flying Oyster. Yeah, and they shouldn't have. But like, if every group has a like wild card team or a PCS team or a VCS team in their group that are in theory weaker than NAEU, then your results will be higher than when you have a year where your fucking 4th team in your group is RNG, right? Like, that's pretty straightforward. I feel like a lot of people just like go, hey, the results are worse, therefore the region's getting worse. I do think the Eastern regions are getting better, but it's not like fucking NA or EU are like going back in time. Like, it's just we have stronger teams in groups. Like, so relative to the pack, they are behind.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to bring up is like, you know, if your expected wins every year are 1 versus Eastern teams, and X versus lower tier teams, and you remove the lower tier teams and add more teams with fewer like expected wins. It's just it is kind of weird to then complain about that, I guess.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we've had people put very obvious like minor regions who like pretty clearly don't like have historical or don't have performances at Worlds in and lump them in with NA, like as like, oh, is the the Brazilian league, the Mexican league, like the Turkish league, whatever. Like it's pretty wild to consider any of those as replacements for NA, I guess.
Yeah.
And then to turn around and say like EU is so much like greater because they sent one team that probably didn't deserve it if we're going to account for
the worst team out of
the
like
bug.
the 8, right?
Yeah, I mean and if we're going to account for the bug, like probably don't make it out of groups that day.
Arguably worse
right?
than JDG as well, yes.
Yeah.
But
or
yeah,
top, you mean?
Sorry, top. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're arguably worse than JDG.
Arguably. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's just weird. I think the reality is like NA and EU are actually pretty close. I think the bigger arguments against NA are the fact that like we fucking eat EU's talent, we eat other regions' talent, and then still are worse. But I think the actual like if you just want to say like this region versus this region, they're pretty fucking close.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I want to quickly discuss preseason items. This is like a weird way to discuss something else, I guess.
Yeah, this will be a like a good closeout because hey, why are we making such like so the biggest issue for me is that we're making such like grandiose like absolute statements. This is going to ruin League of Legends. The role will be the game will be unplayable for certain roles. Like, okay, so first of all, like they're not in a live environment with they're in an environment with zero like matchmaking whatsoever. The content you're seeing is probably produced by clickbaiting at this point. 15 quintillion HP from Goliath ? Yeah. Like, no, that's not going to happen in a game. I think that's been the biggest like perpetrator of items so far is Goliath still beating Strength, which is it's called now. If you do the math on it, it is nothing, right? Like it is not going to break the game the way that people are saying.
It could be a strong item.
Yeah, it could be a strong item. It might even break the game in the future. But if you evaluate the item by itself and have 5,000 HP for which to scale the attack off of it, like you're dealing 475 physical damage, which is reduced by armor. And at the point of you having 5,000 HP, people are probably going to be reducing that by 50%, pretty easily. And on top of that, the amount you gain, you gain 10%, man. 10% of it is 47 HP. You gain 47 and a half
5,000.
Yeah, you gain 47 and a half HP after you have 5,000. So like, I think that's one of the things that boy howdy, we have a lot of League of Legends players who see infinite scaling or long-term scaling and are like, holy shit, like this is going to ruin the game. Like and yet we have Nasus, who's existed as a subpar champion forever. Vigar, barely saw play like for a little bit, but not because of his infinite scaling. It's because he has an ultimate ability on E, right? Sion isn't picked for his infinite scaling. Swain isn't picked for infinite scaling. Senna's like largely not picked because she scales infinitely. She just scales really hard. So then to actually run through these numbers and still have people saying like, holy shit, it's gonna be so broken is like absolutely insane to me.
Yeah, like I mean, I think it mostly comes from a whole like different subject section. I think it's like very much showing in preseason items where like people are excited for them, which I think it comes from a good spot. I think people are excited about stuff, right? That being said, I think this comes from like this general thing where people don't think about things that they say very often. Like when the Goliath first came out, I remember reading a Reddit comment. This wasn't from our community, but I think our community does a lot of this stuff, but not to like this degree. Where someone was like, "Holy fuck! Do you see the mythic pass on this? You get 1% max HP for like or whatever, right? For every mythic every enemy build." and people are like, holy fuck, that's cracked. And the only way that's fucking better is if you have 10,000 HP than like other tank mythic passives. Like, what do you like? It's just like, and then like people are like, well, then after the fact, justify. They're like, well, with the new Goliath passive, 10,000 HP is like going to be super doable. Like, what the fuck are you smoking?
Exactly.
Like people just don't think about the words they say, and it's so fucking aggravating, man.
Well, the thing is, like, you think about the words you say, you just don't think about the content behind that. Like, really break down how much HP 10,000 HP is when our highest HP item gives you 800.
Yeah.
Like, where are you getting the other 92% of that value from? Like, where's it coming from? From getting 50 HP per proc? Like, okay, yeah, I guess if you're in an hour-long League of Legends game that doesn't exist anymore, like, yeah, you get it very first item. Yeah, okay, maybe you do get up to 10,000 HP. But, like, by that time, you've had people scale. Like, there is anti-HP items in the game. Leandries is going to be burning you for a fuck ton. Like, Bork is going to be absolutely molesting you. Like, it's yeah. I don't know. And even if sorry, I just punched my microphone out of a rage. Like, even after that, even if these items tend to be super giga broken OP, like, there are characters who easily deal with 10,000 HP. We'll see Vayne make a comeback. Like, we'll see Kog'Maw make a comeback. These characters exist. Like, and that's sort of how the game like flows. You know, that's how balance like functions.
Oh, for sure. Like, I don't know. I feel like there's not a lot of thought put in stuff. It's the same thing with like, I think this comes from the bigger argument of like this preseason, like over being like, holy fuck. It comes from a good place of excitement. Don't get me wrong.
Yes.
But I think it comes from a lot of, just in general, people like to assume how stuff's going to play out in their head. Right. So we're seeing this not with preseason items, but like the biggest one that I saw recently was with the Udyr rework. We saw a fucking... We saw a preview of him, and people were like, oh, he's a stat stick. What do you mean? We haven't seen what he does yet, right? Like, he's a stat stick? Like, we haven't seen his HP. We haven't seen his ability numbers. We haven't seen anything. And then when we saw Cassante, it's cute. Like, it's cute in one way. It's like just a little frustrating. Is like, I saw someone like go, oh, someone's like, oh, what role is he? By the way, we saw the fucking 30-second teaser, right? And someone goes, oh, what role is he?
This was like a 30-second teaser in which 0 abilities like had been displayed.
It's where he's like fucking looking at his notepad with like his lover or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And someone in our Discord goes, hey, what role is he? And someone responds, he's a top laner, but probably also will be a jungler.
Yeah, it's like, man, I almost would prefer that there were some qualifiers like on that statement, and I would be 100% okay with it. Like, if you just qualify,
he seems to be a bruiser, which obviously he's supposed to be a top laner. He's a bruiser. Typically bruisers can also be played jungle, so I'm excited to try him out in the jungle.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that is okay. I'm okay with that. But then to like, it's the absolute for me. It's the absolute statement for me. Like,
when people double down, it makes me want to fucking lose my mind.
Yeah, exactly. Like, this character will be good. Like, come on, man. Like, let's not make those statements when we have 0. Maybe he does 15% damage to jungle creeps. Like, and that's just not part of his kit that is revealed at this time because none of his kit's revealed.
Yeah, like he might be a good jungler. I just think that like saying it like as an absolute off of like nothing is crazy. Same with the Udyr thing where like we saw him fucking just like we saw
him run through a Morgana Q and an Ashe ultimate. I think that was it.
He's a stat stick.
But like, oh man, that term, like there's no stat sticks in League. Like that like to some degree every single character has counterplay and like that's how the game
I also don't think a lot of people know where stuff comes from a lot of the time, so it gets like turned into shit. The whole idea of a stat stick is that based on like them having items, like their items versus your items is the only factor that matters in who wins the fight, right? Like there's no counterplay. If they have this item over your items, they have the stats to beat you, right? Like for example, a Trundle would be a character that it would be considered a stat stick, right? By that definition. But I've seen stat stick applied to fucking like 50 characters, man.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and I think it's just speaking in such absolutes and having like this predefined criteria that you could probably fit every single League of Legends character into, like to some degree, is like very frustrating, I guess. When I personally think Riot's done an absolutely fantastic job of making sure that characters to some degree have counterplay, and it's pretty obvious what that counterplay is after you like play into it or have there's easily accessible resources that will say that will display what the counterplay is.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
It's just a
don't
little
speak
silly.
in such absolutes.
We're also like not trying to flame anyone. It's more like just frustrations of like, I think everyone does this stuff to some degree, right? And
Yeah.
It is very hard to have discussions when stuff like this is brought up, right? With any of these things that we've talked about, they're just very hard when people are like, this is the way it is.
Yeah, exactly. We speak in such absolutes, and then we're also not willing to change our opinions, like based on like counter evidence. I think that's another like large portion of the frustration for me, is that I feel like and this is like human nature, not even exclusive to our Discord, but like you don't want to be wrong, so it is easier to like double down on your opinion than it is to consider alternatives, which like
for sure.
it makes it not very fun to argue or to have these discussions, because like at the end of the day, like what are you going to accomplish if you're both just like screaming at a brick wall, and that brick wall being your argument. It's frustrating when that happens, or like a lack of acknowledgement of another point or something like that.
Yeah. Either way, like I just want to have like fun discussing stuff. That's like where it all really comes from.
Yeah.
Is like it's very hard to have some discussions when stuff's predetermined. I don't even think you need to back down from your arguments. I think going into it where you're not listening to people is fucking whack. But like you don't even need to back down from your arguments. You just need to like at least listen to people.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like I don't know how many times I've brought up an argument at like a point, like me saying, oh, Aatrox with these 3 items or whatever, wow, that's a fucking 60% win rate. And then you came in and were like, hey, if you look up literally any character, it has these stats. And it's like, oh, okay, like I'm wrong. That's not a point I will use anymore. A data point that I'll consider anymore. And like I think that is okay. It's okay to say you're wrong. It's okay to say I don't know. It's okay to change your opinions based on new evidence or discussion.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's very important. It's a very mature thing to do.
Yeah, and it makes people want to have more discussions with you. Like if you're constantly being combative and like, no, my opinion's right, and there's like nothing that you can do to change it whatsoever. Like I'm just not going to interact with you then, because I know that where this leads, and it is a road to nowhere.
Yeah, but either way, just be more open-minded. Listen to what we said. Our thoughts are the only ones that matter.
Yeah. Don't disagree with us
kidding.
though.
Yeah. But anyways, I think that's like fun. I think next month Colton's doing his.
I think so. No idea what he has planned. It'll be fun.
I'm sure he has something juicy.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome.
Okay.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.